Who is universally loved, but is actually an a-hole? Oprah. She spent decades getting paid by every quack with a pseudoscientific health product to appear as a guest on her show. It's no wonder her apprentices are a dubious psychiatrist and the quack weirdo doctor who continued her business of using the trust of gullible Americans to sell snake oil. I have always disliked Oprah. I remember once on her show, they were talking about how dirty certain things around the house are. It was mentioned how much bacteria builds up on bed sheets, and the guest recommends washing sheets at least once a week, and that rich Oprah scoffs, looks disgusted, and said, "I have mine changed every day." To which the guest says, "Well, for the average person, that's not practical." She quickly forgot what it's like to not be ultra rich. My mom was a big Oprah fan when I was a kid, so I grew up watching the show with her. I used to like her, mainly because of those big giveaways and fun stuff she would do like that. But then there was one show she did where she was showing. I don't even remember what exactly the show's theme was, just that part of it was demonstrating products, so it was probably one of her "these are my favorite new things and you should all definitely buy them too" episodes. One of the products she was showing off was bras, specifically sports bras. So she had all these models come out in different styles and colors of this sports bra, and she would walk around them and talk about all of the cool features. Then she was showing off the support of one of the bras by literally jiggling one of the model's boobs. She would grab right below the boob and shake, so she wasn't groping, but was definitely shaking a girl's breast on national television. The model was clearly uncomfortable and actually pushed Oprah's hand off, and Oprah kept talking without acknowledging it, then did it again, and the model had to push her off again. It made me so uncomfortable to watch this, and I've never been able to like Oprah ever since. So gross. I felt so sorry for that poor model who definitely had no power or recourse in the situation. Before it became public knowledge, I always had to tell people what an asshole Bill Cosby was 20 plus years ago. Old guy here who can remember when Lisa Bonet said like 30 years ago that she didn't think highly of Bill Cosby, and the whole world came down on her like, how can this entitled little brat who owes her whole career to Bill Cosby not love him? Turns out she was just a better judge of character than most. Until recently, Ellen. I cannot speak for the rest of society, but I certainly never liked her. She has dead eyes. I can't explain it, but she does. Ellen's fall from grace has been well-deserved and overdue. Well, she was always off. That's why most fellow comedians didn't associate with her as much, even when she got famous. I've never really been clear on how she actually got to be so famous. Jerry from Tom and Jerry. I completely agree with you. I always felt bad for Tom. Tom was just being a good cat trying to get rid of a pest. Jerry clearly had advanced intelligence and could have relocated literally anywhere else with ease, yet he chose to stay and gleefully tortured an innocent cat for years. I've got my suspicions about Steve Harvey. The audacity to be married like 4 times and then write a book about marriage. What do you know about marriage, Steve? What does Steve Harvey not know about marriage? We asked 100 of his ex-wives. The top 7 answers are on the board. Wilson. The way he just floated away at the end like their friendship meant nothing. Such a smug look on his face, too. What a total prick. I thought y'all were talking about Wilson from Home Improvement and was so confused about what his face looked like. Maya Angelou was a raging bish. The gal in the office next to mine had to coordinate her visit to our university. She said in her 30-year career of coordinating VIP celebrity speakers, Maya Angelou was the only one who treated her like absolute crap. She did a lecture at my college, and a student asked a question that I thought was completely reasonable. Something along the lines of, "Do you ever get discouraged during the writing process, and how do you keep going?" She started berating him for asking such a stupid question, and was like, "Look at my body of work. Where do you get the idea that I'm ever discouraged?" It was really weird. Hello. I respect you and would like to learn from you in this educational setting you agreed to attend. Screw you. Dr. Phil. He takes advantage of mentally ill people for money. I lost all respect for him after hearing Todd Herzog's story. For those who don't know, Todd won Survivor at 22 and suffered from alcoholism in the years following. He went on Dr. Phil in 2013 and they gave him alcohol and Xanax. His appearance on the show was, not great. Fortunately, he turned his life around and got married a couple of years ago. Damn, I lost all respect for Phil. I don't call him doctor. When he had the guy that was running the bum fights website on, Phil was hoping to lay some sort of righteous smackdown, but the dude showed up dressed exactly like Phil, bald spot and all. When confronted about how he exploits other people's suffering for monetary gain, dude just fired back, "Isn't that exactly what you do?" and was promptly booted off the show, interview over. Phil was butthurt because a degenerate called him on his crap on national TV. Steve Jobs. People worship him, and I understand why to some extent. He revolutionized technology, but he was very emotionally abusive to his daughter. She released a memoir, if I recall correctly. Very disturbing stuff. He was a grade A peen to his daughter's mother. He left both of them on welfare and food stamps. He was a grade A peen to everyone. Steve Jobs was huffing his own farts until the day he died. Rachel Ray. Loved her show until I went to see her live. In between takes, she was not a very nice person. I knew someone who did production work for Food Network in the early 2000s. Most of the personalities at the time were actually pretty lovely, but apparently Rachel Ray was borderline despised by the film and production crews. She was just generally known as a mean person to work with. I had one of her cookbooks because I found it at a thrift store. It was just unnecessarily confusing. Instead of steps, there are paragraphs. She has no idea how long prep work actually takes. In the 15 seconds, the garlic is sautéing before adding the oysters, zest 3 lemons, that kind of stuff. SpongeBob. Imagine living near him. Squidward is worse. I have one in my building. That asshole was squeaking and squawking on his clarinet at 10:30, regularly. Absolutely awful shrieking, old creaky door noises. I had to take a few recordings of this happening late at night and send it to the administration. Thing is, SpongeBob and Squidward actually lived in separate houses a fair distance from each other. It wasn't like Squidward was SpongeBob's upstairs neighbor. Also, Squidward's house is literally made of thick-ass rock sediment. I think it's safe to assume that it's quite a bit soundproof. SpongeBob's voice and other shenanigans cut through all of that and still bothered Squidward. But that's exactly the point. SpongeBob is loud. We never see a single scene where Squidward's clarinet playing is heard while SpongeBob is in his house. But we see countless scenes where Squidward is trying to sleep, but SpongeBob prevents it with his noise. Old reference, but Gary Berghoff, aka Radar from MASH. Apparently he was notoriously hard to work with, and generally an asshole to the movie and show cast and crew. But his character was so beloved that viewers never thought he was like that. On the flip side, poor Larry Linville, Major Frank Burns, was known to be an extremely nice guy, but got sneered at and generally treated like crap by the public due to his character in the show. Just goes to show you should separate the art from the artist. I grew up near Gary. He lived in my hometown for a long time and had some kids when he was quite old already. I went to school with his son in the early 2000s. Have met him and seen him around a lot. Can confirm he's a total peen. And you cannot call him Radar. He'll flip his absolute crap on you. I have a friend who lived next door to him in Paradise. When he was still up there, he sounded like an absolute nightmare neighbor. Pretty much all your favorite rock stars from the 70s and 80s had underage girlfriends. Some even adopted them from as young as 14 and became their legal guardians so they could live with and have sex with them and essentially keep them trapped at home to not get caught. Steven Tyler and Jimmy Page stick out, but Bowie and Prince get dishonorable mentions. I'm sure that's just a start. Seinfeld dated a 17-year-old when he was 38, 16. So did Paul Walker in his 30s. Steve Harvey. For those who want to know, watch his interviews on women and atheists. He's cheated on his wives, is physically abusive, and acts like religion is the only thing between him and killing and raping people. Back in the 2010s, I was all over that odd future Wolfgang kill them all slogan, free Earl and screw Steve Harvey. Earl's been freed, but screw Steve Harvey. Probably 90% of celebrities. Not Keanu, he's the whole 10%. Martha Stewart. I witnessed her call her assistant, and I quote, a worthless piece of crap. No one should be called that for accidentally dropping her handbag. Was waiting for this. I work in the aviation industry and have for 25 years now. Back when I was still fairly new, I was working line service for an FBO, a fixed base operator, the folks who provide handling services for private and corporate aircraft. One day, a plane comes in after dropping a passenger off in Maine. The crew needed someone to clean the airplane, and the job fell to me. The plane was trashed, food ground into the carpeting, garbage all over the place, pet hair everywhere. Took me a few hours to scrub the inside of that plane. The crew thanked me and gave me a $100 tip afterwards. Then the captain said to me, "You'll never guess who made that mess." Martha Stewart. I was in shock. He said she was the biggest bitch they had ever flown, and both the captain and the first officer said they would refuse to fly her in the future. I am now an airline pilot, but I have several friends who went into the corporate private fractional side of aviation. Martha Stewart has been kicked out of every fractional jet ownership program there is. Raytheon, Travel Air, Flight Options, NetJets, FlexJet, and several others, all because of her abusive and downright nasty treatment of staff. Heard the same thing from a friend who is in the fractional side. Worst celebrity ever. Tim Allen lived near me for a while, always a pompous ass. However, the gentleman who plays Gus Fring on Breaking Bad is a real good guy. Remembered my name and says hi to me when we run into each other at Whole Foods. He also tipped the cashier at Whole Foods $100 just because. Ironic, he remembered your name, but to you, he is the gentleman who played Gus Fring. Not sure if they're universally loved, but I used to work in restaurants for the House of Mouse, and both Howie Mandel and Bobby McFerrin were total jerks. Acted like they were completely above everyone else, and both of them let their bratty kids run screaming around the restaurant. Always smart when people carrying hot trays of food are everywhere. I had a lot of positive celebrity interactions, but those two were awful. Can't stand to listen to Don't Worry Be Happy since. I can confirm Mandel was a total asshole. I work at a restaurant in Toronto and threw some party for some game show, and he was just such a peen to everyone, to the point no one wanted to help him. He made some snide comment about who he is, and I said, "Oh, that's nice, but these other folks were still here before you." Heard of a similar comeback to this in the late 90s Ibiza scheme. The current DJ flavor of the month was in a bar expecting free champagne and pulled the "Do you know who I am" routine. The bar lady apparently replied, "Yes, and you earn more than the rest of this bar put together. Pay up." Eric Clapton. What a douchebag he turned out to be. He's an oddity. His racist, coked-out rant in the 70s on stage sparked the Rock Against Racism movement. It's bizarre considering he idolizes and owes much of his success to American black blues artists. Seriously, B.B. King is his hero and he still hates black people? That's a hell of an internal contradiction. Love his music, but yeah, he's a bad egg. James Franco. The dude gets caught trying to sleep with underage girls regularly like he isn't even good at hiding it, yet he gets a pass every time. He recently settled a lawsuit for over $2 million for sexually harassing and groping the female students of a film course he was running, and his career has taken a nosedive over the last few years, with even longtime collaborator Seth Rogen saying he would never work with him again. So I wouldn't say he is loved or even liked at this point. Didn't know Seth Rogen was refusing to work with him. Good for him. He, Seth Rogen, seems like a genuinely good person and one of the good ones. Jennifer Lopez. I'll back that one up with stories from former coworkers. She was well known to the techs that did the telecom stuff in her Miami condo building. She was one of those no eye contact, no talking directly to people. I said the thread count has to be at least 600. You useless drudge. I can't stay here. She didn't make a lot of friends in the UK. Steve Jobs. It's pretty well known that he is a gigantic asshole, but he's still pretty romanticized in the tech sphere. I got to have a chat with Steve Wozniak, and while there was still an air of respect, Wozniak said Jobs had a great way with words, marketing, and tying the bows on a product. It was definitely underlined with a disdain for certain personality traits. He also made a lot of this clear during his presentation too. Side note, Wozniak was a delight to talk to. The dude just oozed enthusiasm and such positive energy overall. The fact that he even spent like 15 minutes talking to me after the convention was awesome in itself. There were hundreds of people there, and I bet most of them could have given him a more topical or engaging conversation. In fact, I mostly just wanted a photo with him. He was the one that engaged in a longer conversation. From what my fiance told me is that Beyonce is extremely entitled and rude to people. He worked in a restaurant where many celebrities would go and he loved most of them, Beyonce and Jay-Z. Remember when she had an entire hospital wing closed so she could give birth? It wasn't an entire wing of a hospital, but it was an entire section of the maternity ward. In some ways, that's worse. How many pregnant women were turned away? Additionally, her hired goons, bodyguards, would stop people from entering the entire maternity ward and tell them they couldn't come in, even if they had every right to be there. Gordon Ramsay is universally loved for being an a-hole. I'm pretty sure the twist here is he's actually a chill person, that's just his TV persona, but I could be wrong. You can watch the UK version of Kitchen Nightmares. All the yelling and swearing is for US TV. In the UK version, he is usually not mad, just very disappointed. From the crap that I've heard, apparently Nicolas Cage and Jared Leto. Meanwhile, apparently Alan Tudyk, Brendan Fraser, and Nathan Fillion are the nicest people. Jared Leto is no surprise. What a pompous pinhole that guy is. I was flipping channels one night and found some documentary about his band. Watched for a few minutes. There seemed to be absolutely nothing upstairs. Not just dumb, but it seemed like there was just nothing human in there, which I guess is why he can be great in some roles. There's no personality of his own that he has to try to suppress, as it's only emptiness. Jackie Chan. I still see Redditors speaking positively of him from time to time. You know, the whole doing his own stunts thing. But in the Chinese-speaking world, he's widely known as an unfaithful husband, a terrible father, and a CCP-supporting bootlicker. This is the first one in the comments that genuinely surprised me. I had no idea. He definitely puts on an "aw shucks" type of humbleness in any interviews I've seen him with in American media. Wouldn't have guessed that about him, and had never heard of any of it before. Elon Musk. The number of times I have heard about him paying off women because he has sexually harassed them. In what world is Elon Musk universally loved? Not universally, but he has a ton of diehard stans even now who think he's MCU's Tony Stark in real life. Chevy Chase. He is known to treat his co-workers like crap and has thrown out some racial slurs. My favorite story about Chase is Bill Murray yelling that he was a medium talent after they got into a physical altercation. I love it because saying no talent would just seem like Murray was mad and throwing insults. But medium talent is like, I know you had enough ability to get where you are, but so do a lot of mediocre comedians. It's the kind of insult that sticks in your head for a while, especially for an egomaniac like Chevy. It's called damning with faint praise, and Murray is clearly the master of it. If you're famous enough to be universally loved, there will be a part of the population who hates you for being an asshole. There is no one on earth who appeals to everyone. Betty White, and that guy with the sweaters who read to children, Mr. Rogers? I don't think he's famous enough to be universally loved, but Mitch Albom, aka the author of Tuesdays with Morrie, hosted him at an author event for a small venue, and he was furious that the event was so beneath him. Was furious we didn't have a plate of fresh fruit for him. He didn't have a rider or anything demanding we have fruit at the ready, just expected us to know. Was furious that more people didn't show up to fawn over him. Was just generally furious. Instead of talking about his book during the lecture, he spent 20 minutes taking a steaming dump over the staff, venue, and audience. Ironic, given the subject of his books. This Morrie fella must have been a saint to spend every Tuesday with him. Mr. T is one huge idiot. This happened in the 80s and Mr. T was everything at this time. My friend and I were downtown, we were 15 and it was our first trip downtown alone. Saw Mr. T and started towards him for an autograph. As we were walking, he parked his car in front of a bank, and two little boys, about 7 years old, ran up to him, happy as hell. It was Mr. T! This bastard yelled, "Get out of my way, you little motherfrickers," and pushed the kid into his friend. I've hated that bastard ever since. If we had cells back then, a lot of stars would have been canceled. People did and got away with stuff because there was never any proof. Now there is. If you live in Chicago, there are a handful of casinos you can go to, but arguably the nicest one is the Horseshoe in Hammond. You can go there almost any day of the week and play almost any game. And at some point in the night, someone will bring the conversation around to MJ. If you happen to play poker or craps, you'll usually cut down on the degrees of separation and hear from someone who actually saw, or claims to have seen for what it's worth, MJ play because they're apparently his favorite games. There are a lot of stories I've heard, but here's mine. This happened mid-2000s. I didn't grow up in Chicago, never was a Bulls fan, and didn't go through the hero worship, but I understood it. The guy was a legend. I can respect that. My friends who grew up in Chicago did their best to indoctrinate me. One friend in particular, a tiny, feisty, full-hearted, asthmatic, but incredibly athletically achieved Japanese girl, Izzy, you're the best, who grew up in the suburbs, led the charge. She, as a graduate student, had an MJ poster on her wall, and another on the ceiling above her bed. She could make you live his last championship three-pointer with the way she got excited about telling you where she was and how she felt when she saw it. She also carried around his baseball cards in the hopes of one day getting him to sign it. One night, a group of us are at the Horseshoe celebrating the end of a semester. Izzy doesn't gamble, but she knows MJ plays there sometimes and has come along just on the chance that he'll be there. This was, I believe, the third time she has come along with us just for that reason. We're playing craps and having a blast. We're excited and young and getting wasted. It's a good night. Our group is at one end of the craps table when we see the other players at the other end standing taller to look over at something. We turn around, and there he is, at the center and towards the front of this decent-sized group of people. People to either side are hushing up and craning their necks, but he's just walking, staring straight ahead, not even talking to his group. Some people have it in them to try to walk up to him. I wouldn't have. His demeanor is saying nothing but "don't bother me," but some people do, and he does stop for a few of them. Looking back, they were both blondes with tight clothes, but that didn't click with me. It didn't click with Izzy either. She starts to panic a little bit and her face turns red. She takes a few quick breaths before she says to herself mostly, "This is it. This is it. Oh my god." Before I even realize she's gone, she's halfway over to him, and he's done signing the blonde's chests or whatever. He starts walking again by the time she gets to him, and I remember what happened next like I was watching a slow-mo replay. He's walking towards us. Izzy's back is to us, and she's only a few feet away from him. I can tell she has both of her hands forward with the card, obviously looking for an autograph. She told us later that at that moment, she had just opened her mouth to introduce herself. Without looking down, she's barely 5 feet tall. Without breaking stride, he put his hands up, grabs her face like he's palming a basketball, and twists/pushes her head out of his way. Her head is almost twisted completely around and facing us, eyes closed and mouth scrunched against his hand, before she's off to the side and he's moving on. It was like he was pushing open a door. She stumbles a few steps and falls over, and one of his entourage almost trips over her before helping her up and apologizing for him. By this time, MJ is right next to us at the craps table, still looking straight ahead, but he has this smirk on his face I will never forget. I was mad. He didn't have to sign crap. He didn't even have to stop and say hi, but basic human decency stops way before grabbing someone's face and shoving them out of your way. Izzy was shocked and quiet for the rest of the night. At times, she was near tears, but never let us see them. Now, she was the first to say that he didn't owe her anything and is free to do what he wants. I noticed the next time I'm at her place, though, that the posters aren't there anymore, and as far as I know, she never told her story about his championship three-pointer again. That is the most heart-wrenching story I've read in a long, long time. So rude. I hope your friend is doing better now and is tearing crap up on her way to success. Mahatma Gandhi treated his wife as a slave and literally no one knows his children. Might be the father of a nation, but definitely not a father figure to his kids. He slept with underage kids. Truly awful. Ed and Lorraine Warren. I'm not talking about taking advantage of people in vulnerable states and exploiting fear and trying to get famous by proving the paranormal, but Ed kept a young girl in their house. If I recall correctly, they told neighbors she was a fallen woman they were helping out by giving her a job as a live-in maid or nanny. She wasn't. She was a child, and he was a predator, and Lorraine did nothing about it. And yes, they had a kid in the house. Really sickened me to find out because I liked the Conjuring series as horror films and just enjoyed them for being kooky ghost hunters. Boy, was I wrong. I think the real Warrens were quacks, but the fictionalized versions in the movies are just that, fiction. Just like all the ghost stories, Vera Farmiga and Patrick Wilson have such great chemistry, and the movies are fun. It's okay to enjoy them. Alec Baldwin. This has nothing to do with the Rust shooting. He is a jerk among jerks, and there were times I was thinking about giving out a good old ego check, but didn't. Grew up with him. He was a pretentious douche even then. Wanted to be called Xander before he eventually changed Alex to Alec. Always had rage issues and a massive ego. Thing is, his father was a teacher in the school district and was universally admired. Didn't really know his brothers, so can't speak of them. James Corden seems to be able to do no wrong in the US, but over in the UK, we can't stand the sight of him. His AMA was hilarious. So was the segment with Kimmel where he couldn't name a single crew member. Ellen DeGeneres. To be honest, I've always hated her and didn't understand why my mom always enjoyed watching her show. Ellen is the kind of person who would bitch over not getting as many birthday presents as she thinks she deserves. Thanks for watching until the end. If you have something to add, feel free to do so in the comments section below. Then be sure to like this video, hit the notification bell, and subscribe to the channel. Then be sure to stop by the channel to check out another amazing video.